Welcome back, GED scholars and math warriors. In this video, we're going to talk about powers and his cousin square root. And you'll see soon enough why these two are brought up at the same time and taught at the same time. And of course, you see the calculator on your screen because a lot of these problems, folks, some of them, yes, you can get used to, you can memorize the answer, and so you can do it in your head. But I just want you to always rely on your calculator when you have doubt. And I'm going to show you the two buttons that you can use to find the square of something and then the square root. And then there's a third button that I'm going to show you where you can raise that power to a number that's higher than 2. So let's go ahead and take a look. On the screen, we're talking about powers first. And so as you can see from this right side of your screen, it says powers show repeated multiplication using exponents. So for example, if we have 5 times 5 times 5 times 5, I can write it out like that and enter that into my calculator. And it'll give me the same answer as if I had written it with 5 and the exponent of 4. So this 5 is considered the base number and the 4 is the exponent. 5, the base, is being raised to the power of 4. If we wanted to write 5 times 5, we would write it like this. We would do 5 to the power of 2. And so sometimes they might ask you a question where they say, find the square of 5. And when they ask you find the square, they mean they want you to raise it to the second power. So on the calculator, and we'll check out the calculator in a second, but on the calculator, you can use the x squared key, or you can use the caret key when that exponent is greater than 2. So over on the calculator, in the first column, we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 rows up from the bottom. You'll see the button that says x squared. Above that in green, you'll see the square root. And in order to get to this square root sign, you're going to need to press the second key. And this would be the second function key. Above the x squared key, we have our caret key. As I mentioned, the caret key is going to be used when your exponent is greater than 2. So if I want 5 to the power of 4, and then I'm going to hit enter, I get 625. And remember, folks, this is the base number multiplying by itself. This is not 5 times 4 because we know that's 20. So if I wanted to square 5, I would do 5 and then x squared key, enter, and I get 25 because 5 times 5 is 25. So back over on our notes, we can see that an exponent can be a 1, 0, or a negative number. And so these three situations, you want to just remember the rule that goes along with it. So for example, a number raised to the first power is itself. So 9 to the first power is 9. A number raised to the power of 0 is 1. So 9 raised to the 0 power equals 1. A number raised to a negative number is equal to a fraction. So let's check out the cousin square root before we jump into some practice problems. So as you can see, the square root of a number is the base number. So for example, the square root of 25 is 5. And we know that 5 times 5 is 25. So when they ask you what the square root of 25 is, you know, hey, that's 5. So when you have square root questions, you need to be asking yourself, what number times itself equals the number in the bracket? And you might see the expression written out for you like it is up here where they just write out what is the square root of 25. Or you might see the problems and the directions will say solve the equation. And they'll have the number within the square root bracket. So I know I've talked about the importance of making sure you know your multiplication table, but I will share when you know your multiplication table, finding the square root of a number becomes a lot easier as long as the square root is, or I'm sorry, as long as the number within the square root bracket is small enough. So for example, we see on the screen the square root of 9 on the multiplication table that we see below. And folks, you can search online for multiplication tables and you will find many images, nothing you need to pay for. Please don't pay for one because they are free online. So when I have square root of 9, I want to find 9 and I want to make sure I'm looking starting in the upper left hand corner and kind of going diagonal searching for a 9. And sure enough, I find a 9 right here. So what I need to pay attention to is this 9 right down here. And so I see this 9 right here. And this 9 happens when I move up vertically to the orange, it's 3, and then over to the left, times 3 equals 9. We see what's the square root of 49. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to come diagonally and just have my eye search and I find 49. Okay, well, what two numbers are meeting to get to 49? When I look up, I see 7. When I look to the left, I see 7. So I know 7 times 7 is 49, which means the square root of 49 is 7. So folks, on GEDtalk.com, on the resources page or the math page, I have a worksheet that has 40 problems that cover exponent and square root. And there are word problems as well, because you might see some word problems, and the answers are there too. So folks, make sure you definitely pay attention to your multiplication tables, a minimum of the 12 times 12 table, and you should do well because not only do you have your calculator, but as I mentioned, once you study the table, you'll remember a lot of this. So let's go ahead and jump into using our calculator to take care of some of these problems. So the first problem we see is 3 squared, and this is an easy one, so let's just jump over to our calculator and we're going to go ahead and take care of this by clicking on the 3 and then the x squared button and then enter, and your answer is 9. If we were to write this out and not use our calculator, what we would write out is 3 times 3. Let's look at the second problem. 4 to the power of 1. Well, we read in our scenarios that any number that is to the power of 1 is its own number. And even if we came over to the calculator and we entered 4, and we can't do x squared, right? Because it's not to the power of 2, it's to the power of 1. So I need to use the caret key above the x squared to enter 1. And when I hit enter, I see 4. Let's go to the next problem. So this is the square root problem. So we already saw from the first one that 3 squared equals 9. And if that's the case, then what's the square root of 9? Yep, if you said 3, you're correct. But let's jump over to the calculator so we can practice a square root problem. So we're going to click our second key to get the second function, and we're going to click on the x squared key to get that square root bracket. And then I'm going to enter 9 and hit enter. The next problem is 25 to the power of 0. And that's one of our situation, folks, where we know that if it's to the power of 0, the number is equal to 1. So let's jump over to our calculator. And folks, you just want to get really good with the calculator so you know where your buttons are and you can move quickly and correctly through it. So I'm going to enter 25. I'm going to use my caret key and raise it to the power of 0, and I got 1. Okay, so this is an interesting one because it's -3 squared. The exponent isn't what's negative. That's not one of the scenarios. This is where the base number is negative. And in order to enter this into your calculator correctly, you want to make sure that the -3 is entered within parentheses. So over on our calculator, I'm going to clear the screen and I'm going to do in open parentheses, come down to the last row and click on the negative button, 3, close parentheses, and then the x squared button. And then I'll click enter and the answer is 9 because we know that two negatives make a positive. -3 times, do we get the times? Nope, there we go. -3, enter is 9. Oh, wow. These are just out of this world. Okay, so what we need to do, folks, is just you have to make sure we're using our parentheses and we're going to enter the problem just like we see it on the practice screen. So come back to your calculator. Let's clear it. And I'm going to open parentheses, 3 squared, close parentheses, squared. Enter, and we get 81. Makes sense because 3 squared, what's 3 times 3 is 9, and 9 squared is 81. So if you were asked what's the square root of 81, what do you think it is? If you said 9, you're right, it is 9. Let's go to another problem. We have another square root problem. Square root of 64. Let's go to our calculator. Second key, square root 64. Enter, we get 8. Square root of 90 equals, oh my gosh, what kind of answer is that? It's not what we're used to seeing. We got whole numbers, but now we're getting this interesting answer where it's saying 3 in the square root of 10. Well, folks, if none of the answer choices on the exam are in this setup that you see on the screen, I want you to then toggle the information on the calculator so you get the answer as a decimal. Okay, next we have the square root of 90. So second key, square root, and then we're going to enter 90, enter, and we get an interesting answer. We get 3 and then the square root of 10. So folks, on the exam, if none of the answer choices look like what you just saw, we want to come down on our calculator and we want to use the toggle key, which is above the enter key, for it to give the answer as a decimal. So I'm going to click on it. And we now see that answer as 9.486. And then so hopefully one of the answer choices would be either the whole number 9 if they're asking you to round to the closest whole number, or it's going to show the decimal. So another square root. So we're going to do square root of 242, and you get the same type of answer. So what do we need to do? We're going to toggle, and now we see the decimal version of that answer. The square root of 57, hit enter, and we get the square root of 57 is the square root of 57. So let's toggle that and see what we get. So in decimal form, it's 7.5498 on with this decimal. And so I'm just interested to see if I click the x squared, I get 57. So folks, as I mentioned on GED.com, on the resources page or the math page, there is a worksheet with 40 problems and answers that will help you with powers and square root numbers. There are 10 word problems in there as well, because it's really important that you make sure you understand word problems. And like I always mention, folks, make sure you're using your calculator efficiently. Thanks for watching, GED Scholars. You know what you're doing. Keep your head up. You've got this.